What is up guys, Morton here from SteamFirst.com with a review for Moebius Empire Rising, a point-and-click adventure game developed by Phoenix Online Studios and released April 15th, 2014 on Steam for $30. I've learned that when it comes to video games, it's generally a bad idea to have high expectations because you'll be let down more often than not, and I wasn't sure what to think about the screenshots I saw, but I was pleasantly surprised with Moebius Empire Rising. The game is basic point-and-click adventure gameplay. You go to various areas and you search for things you can click on, then you click on them and you either learn something valuable, pick it up and take it with you, or it's something useless. Then there are puzzles where you either need to learn something from clicking on it or use an item that you picked up before. Usually the biggest problems point-and-click games have are either there's too many things to click on so it takes forever to get anywhere, or there aren't enough things to click on so the answers to the puzzles are obvious. Moebius Empire Rising seems to get it right in most areas. There are lots of things to click on or learn about, but it's mostly interesting and there aren't a lot of completely worthless things all over the place. The other issue I have with some point-and-click games is a lot of the times puzzles are solved with developer logic. That is, the solution is something that developers thought of and nobody else would logically do in that situation. And there are a couple instances of that in Moebius Empire Rising, such as one point where you can't see inside a truck, so you need a light, and the logical thing to do would be to use your phone that you have on you because any smartphone can be used as a flashlight, but that doesn't work. You have to track down a flashlight somewhere else and it just seems kind of pointless. But by and large, all the puzzles have logical solutions that are pretty easy to figure out. The other big part of Moebius Empire Rising is matching people with their historical counterparts. So basically, you'll have a person and 10 or so facts about them. Then it gives you multiple people in history who have similar traits, and you figure out who the person is most likely to be. This is pretty simple a lot of times, but there are some tricky ones. There's no limit to guesses though, so if you wanted to, you could just guess randomly until you get it right, and it might actually be faster to do that than going through and reading everything, but it probably wouldn't be as interesting. There are also a couple of side games throughout, such as darts, that you have to play to progress, but there are only like 2 of them in the entire game. A few more would have been nice because they offer a good change of pace for at least a few minutes. The gameplay gets a 4 out of 5. As far as point-and-click gameplay goes, it's pretty good. I would have liked it if the puzzles had been a little more complex because most of them were very obvious, but there were a couple of challenging ones that make you think, so that was nice. But really, the gameplay of point-and-click adventures is never the selling point. The story is what matters here, so let's talk about that. The story follows Malachi Rector, an antiques dealer with a photographic memory and an unrivaled knowledge of history. A secret U.S. government organization hires him to investigate a murdered woman in Venice to see if she resembles any historical figures. But why hire an antiques dealer for that, and what relevance do past people have on current issues? The story takes you around the world to many different locations, and has a huge amount of historical information. The characters are interesting and develop nicely over the course of the story. The most important part of a story, though, is that it draws you in and makes you want to know more, and I can safely say that this is definitely one of the better stories I've heard. There's a pretty big mystery aspect, and it seems like every time one question gets answered, another one gets asked. After a short introduction showing off some of the gameplay, the story starts picking up, and it never really slows down until the end. There's a lot of twists and turns, and I really enjoyed it a lot. It did seem to end kind of abruptly, but this is the video game industry, and ending in a way that suggests a sequel is kind of how things are done here. Overall, though, the story was really engaging and interesting all the way through. It gets a 4.5 out of 5 in total. My biggest complaint is that I really would have liked to see 1 or 2 more chapters showing some more at the end, but really, it's a minor complaint. The story did wrap up decently, and the entire thing was well done. Plus, there was some really clever and humorous dialogue that I liked a lot. The graphics, on the other hand, weren't so well done. I quite liked the settings and backgrounds, they looked pretty good, but the animations were abysmal. People would glitch into walls, and the walking animations looked completely absurd with limbs moving in ways that make no sense at all. I personally don't care that much about graphics in games. I want a good story and good gameplay more than anything else, but I realize that's not the case for everybody. The graphics really aren't that good, and is by far one of the game's biggest flaws. The graphics get a 2 out of 5. As much as I think the landscapes and backgrounds are pretty well done, the terrible animations and the way the human characters look is just too bad to ignore. It really does kind of take away from the game. Something Moebius Empire Rising does very well is the soundtrack. The music is good and it fits well with what's happening during the game. They did a very good job on not only the soundtrack, but the voice acting as well. The actors really did well delivering the lines, and there weren't any characters I thought sounded bad. I was genuinely impressed. Normally, you wouldn't expect an indie game to have good voice acting, or even really any voice acting, but everything in Moebius Empire Rising sounded very good. The sound gets a 4.5, and the only reason it doesn't get a 5 is because some of the cutscenes get really loud or really quiet, which got kind of annoying since there are a fair number of cutscenes. As for replayability, there really isn't any. As you'd expect from point-and-click adventure games, the main gameplay is solving puzzles. Once you know the answers and what to do, there's little reason to do it again. There were a couple of different dialogue options you could see if you really wanted to by doing another playthrough, but I can't really see the point. There's no moral choice system in the game, and there's only one ending, so doing multiple playthroughs won't add or change much at all aside from a couple lines of dialogue. Replayability gets a 1, it's there if you really must complete every single achievement and hear all the dialogue, but there's little to no point and I can't imagine many people would bother. Overall, Moebius Empire Rising gets a 4 out of 5. The worst part of the game is the graphics, but if you can look past that, you'll find a really good overall experience. For $30, you'll get roughly 6 to 8 hours of really interesting and compelling story and fun gameplay, which is a pretty good value as far as I'm concerned when most games are $60 and hardly last that long. If you're looking for something action-packed with tons of fast-paced gameplay, then this obviously isn't the genre you want, but if you're looking for a fun point-and-click adventure and a heavy focus on story, then this is definitely worth a look.
His biography reads like that of Raffaello Sanzio d'Urbino, the 15th century painter better known as Raphael.
You do not disappoint, Mr. Rector. Such a pleasure to finally meet you. Truly, I'm delighted.
Wonderful. Now perhaps we can discuss the job you have for me.